The wind never stopped in Bitter Hollow. It carried grit sharp enough to scratch the eyes, and it whispered like ghosts through the skeletal remains of barns and broken fences. The sun hung low, bloated and red, staining the sky as if remembering something awful. There were no songs in Bitter Hollow anymore. No laughter, just silence and the creaking sound of wood mourning in the breeze. They said the girl vanished the day the vultures came, black-hearted men with dust in their blood and cruelty in their eyes. Her family never had a chance. Flames lit the sky that night, and the screams clawed all the way down to the edge of the desert. By morning, there was only smoke and a few scattered feathers, drifting on the wind like lost prayers. No one spoke her name aloud since. In the half-collapsed chicken coop behind the scorched remains of the farmhouse, Clara May pressed herself deeper into the hay and wire. Her dress was tattered, crusted with dried blood and dirt. Her knees bore scabs from crawling on splintered boards. Days had passed. Maybe 4. Maybe 5. Time had twisted inside her like a snake. Her only company were the hens, nervously pecking around her, and a dull kitchen knife she clutched with white-knuckled fingers. She hadn't spoken since the screaming stopped. She barely blinked. Every crack of wood or flutter of wing made her flinch. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. Sleep was where memories waited. The ranch had fallen quiet again. Not the soft quiet of peace, but the kind that clings after horror, thick and waiting, until the horse came. She heard it before she saw it. The slow clop of hooves on the dirt road, steady and unhurried. Then the groan of leather, the jangle of a spur. Someone had arrived. Clara held her breath, eyes wide, crouched low. Through the slats of the coop, she saw a tall figure step down from the saddle. The man moved like smoke, slow but sure, as if the world had grown tired of moving fast. A long gray duster hung off his frame like a shroud, brushing the tops of his worn boots. A rifle rested across his back. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face, but when he turned toward the coop, Clara saw his eyes, pale, hard, storm gray. Jonas Crow. She didn't know his name then, only that he didn't belong here. No one did. He stepped past the blackened shell of the house, pausing by the porch where her father's rocking chair still creaked in the wind. A vulture circled overhead, but the man didn't look up. Instead, he walked toward the coop, his boots crunching on dry earth and broken glass. He paused, his head tilted slightly. Clara's hand tightened on the knife. Her breath hitched, and then a hen, startled by something, squawked and fluttered up in a burst of feathers. The man turned. His hand went to the rifle, then paused. He stepped closer. Clara burst out with a scream, lunging forward with the blade. Her body moved before her mind could stop it. A wild, desperate strike meant to keep the world away. But he didn't flinch. He didn't even raise a hand. Instead, he looked her straight in the eyes and knelt, slow as molasses. "Ain't no one gonna hurt you again, girl," he said, voice like gravel and quiet thunder. "Not while I still got breath in me." Clara froze, blade trembling in her grip. Her chest heaved. For a moment, the knife hovered between them. Then her hand gave out. The blade slipped from her fingers and hit the dirt with a soft thud. She tried to speak. Nothing came out but a dry rasp. Her lips cracked. Her legs folded under her. Jonas caught her before she hit the ground. He lifted her like she weighed nothing, cradling her thin frame in calloused arms. She didn't fight him. There was nothing left to fight with. Just the echo of screams and the warm darkness behind her eyelids. She buried her face in his shoulder and sobbed, silent and shaking, the tears coming in hot waves until she had no more left to give. Jonas carried her into the husk of the house. The roof sagged in places, walls scorched, floor covered in ash. But the stone hearth still stood, and wood from the old fence crackled when he fed it into the fire. He laid her on a blanket beside it, found a dented kettle, and poured water from his canteen. He wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and didn't say much, just watched the flames and waited. She sipped the water slowly. Her voice was gone, her throat raw, but her eyes stayed fixed on him, searching. He didn't ask her name, didn't ask what happened. He already knew. Instead, he took off his hat, revealing a jagged scar that ran through his graying hairline, and set it gently beside the fire. He fed more wood to the flames, adjusted the blanket around her, and when she finally whispered, barely audible, "They killed them all," he nodded once. "I know." She turned away, hiding her face. The silence between them stretched long, filled only by the pop of firewood and the distant moan of the wind outside. But it wasn't a cold silence. Not anymore. Later, as the sky faded from red to black, she asked the only question she could form. "Why'd you come?" Jonas looked into the fire, and for a long time didn't answer. Then, quietly, "Sometimes the desert speaks, tells you where you're needed. Other times," he picked up a scorched piece of wood, stared at it, "sometimes you follow the smell of smoke." She studied him. There was something in his eyes. Not just weariness, not just the lines of a hard life, but sorrow buried deep, and something else, resolve, like a man who'd already lost everything and had nothing left but the need to see things right. "Were you looking for me?" she asked. He nodded. "Heard whispers. Folks too scared to search, but I reckon someone had to." Clara blinked. "Why?" Jonas leaned back, stretched his leg, favoring one knee, and stared into the flickering orange light. His voice was soft, almost to himself. "Because I know what it's like to be the one left behind." She didn't know what that meant. Not yet, but the fire warmed her hands, and the blanket, his blanket, smelled of saddle leather and sage. For the first time in days, her breathing slowed. The tremble in her fingers faded. Jonas stood and checked the rifle by the door. The flames danced on the walls behind him, casting long shadows that flickered like ghosts. His silhouette was sharp, unmoving, a guardian carved from ash and silence. He turned back once, nodding toward the hearth. "Get some sleep, Clara May. You're safe now." And with those few words, something in her heart shifted. The coop was behind her. The screams were past. She curled closer to the fire, closed her eyes, and believed him. The desert had a way of healing wounds slower than time could carry them. Its days scorched, and its nights hollowed out the soul. But in the days that followed the firelight and silence of that ruined house, Clara May began to rise. Bit by bit, bone by bone. Jonas never said much. He built her strength back with biscuits and jerky, with boiled coffee she barely tolerated, and with water he hauled from the dry well with a quiet patience. Each morning, he'd hand her a rifle, not to frighten or punish, but to teach. She learned to load with shaking fingers, to hold her aim steady even when the wind howled. Her palms blistered, her eyes narrowed. A name began to take shape on her breath, revenge. When she first said it aloud, her voice low and tight, Jonas didn't look surprised. He didn't lecture, either. He just adjusted her stance and said, "Vengeance is heavy. You sure you want to carry it?" Clara didn't answer. She just squared her shoulders and kept firing. They rode out on the fifth morning. The sun had barely crested the mesa, and the desert shimmered like an open wound. Jonas didn't offer a destination. Clara didn't ask. They rode side by side into the canyons, where the world narrowed and the sky stretched in long strips above. There, in the shadowed stone veins of the land, he told her bits of himself. He was once a U.S. Marshal, though the badge hadn't hung on his chest in years. He spoke of a town called Dry Fork, burned from the inside out when the vultures turned men into monsters. He spoke of a partner, Frank Rudd, who sold him out for gold and whiskey, who stood by while the gang took everything Jonas ever loved, including the boy he raised as his own. "They took something from me, too," Jonas said, his voice rough as saddle leather. "That fire in your belly? I know it well." Clara didn't speak, but she looked at him differently after that, not as a savior or a stranger, something closer, like a man walking beside his own ghost. They followed trails that twisted through stone and sand. They stopped at way stations and sun-bleached watering holes, where eyes watched from behind curtains. Jonas had a way of loosening tongues. One cold stare and a quiet drink was usually enough. A name surfaced in one saloon. The vultures had taken shelter near the hollow mine up Dead Rattler Canyon, fortified in a cabin no law dared approach. 6 men, the barkeep whispered. Maybe 7. not counting what's hiding in the dark. In the corner of that same saloon, Clara spotted a man with a crooked hat and a snake tattoo on his throat. Her blood ran cold. She recognized him. He'd been there that night. She stood too fast. Jonas's hand clamped her wrist before she could move. He stepped forward instead. The outlaw rose, his hand twitching toward the gun on his hip. He never cleared leather. Jonas's revolver flashed once. The thunder crack stopped conversation dead. The man dropped like a sack of meat. Jonas holstered his gun and looked around. No one moved. Just a vulture, he said. You're welcome. They rode hard after that. Clara's stomach clenched with each turn of the canyon path. She could feel the edge of something sharp approaching, like the moment just before a thunderstorm breaks. That night, they climbed the final ridge overlooking the gulch. Below, nestled between rust-colored boulders and dry brush, stood the cabin. A squat, mean-looking structure with thick logs and a chimney that belched black smoke. A corral held 2 horses. A third one paced near the mine's entrance. Oil lamps hung outside, throwing gold light onto the porch. Shadows moved behind the windows. Clara dropped to her belly beside Jonas, her rifle clutched to her chest. Her breath came fast. She saw him, the man with the thick neck and the jagged scar across his cheek. The one who had grabbed her mother by the hair. The one who laughed. Her finger crept toward the trigger. Not yet, Jonas whispered, pulling her hand back. This ain't the place. Wait for night. Wait for truth. She clenched her jaw. Her hands shook. I can take him, she hissed. You take him now, Jonas said, and you'll die with him. You ready for that? She turned her head, eyes wide, desperate. I don't care. Jonas's voice softened. But I do. The wind picked up, dust swirling and small devils around them. The sun fell like a dropped coin behind the rocks, and long shadows bled into every crack. They stayed there in silence, watching, waiting. Clara's fingers tightened, loosened, then tightened again. I want him to feel what I felt, she whispered. Jonas looked at her, long and quiet. That feeling don't go away after, he said. It just burrows deeper. She swallowed hard. Then why are we here? He tilted his head toward the gulch. Because there's others like you. Girls hiding in coops. Boys burying fathers. If we let those bastards ride, more'll come. We do this for them. Not for blood, for peace. His voice wasn't angry. It was steady, unflinching. The voice of a man who'd carried his own vengeance long enough to know the cost. Clara turned her face away. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Night took the canyon slowly. Lamps flared brighter below, and one by one, the shadows of men moved inside the cabin. The sound of drunken laughter floated up the ridge. The scent of meat cooking mixed with the sting of gun oil. Jonas handed her a strip of jerky and a flask of water. She ate in silence. Her pulse had slowed, but her eyes never left the window where her family's killer paced. Down in the dark, the fire grew brighter. In Claire's chest, something colder settled. Not rage, not fear, purpose. She turned to Jonas and asked, "How many bullets you got?" He smiled just barely. Enough. She didn't ask how he knew, because for the first time in days, she trusted him not just with her life, but with the memory of everything she lost. And as the canyon winds howled across the stones and the sky rippled with starlight, 2 figures melted into the dark. One carried justice like a badge. The other, like a flame in her chest, she refused to let die. The moon hung low and full, casting the gulch in a silver glow that turned rocks into ghosts and shadows into threats. Down in the hollow, the vultures laughed around their fire, unaware that death was already climbing down the ridge toward them, quiet as regret. Jonas moved like a man born in darkness, boots barely whispering on the gravel. Beside him, Clara crouched low, her rifle strapped tight to her back, her eyes burning like coals. She held the small cage in both hands, 3 wild chickens, half feral now, feathers ruffled and eyes bright with panic. It was strange, almost funny in a dark way. The coop had once been her prison. Now its battered remnants would set the night ablaze. Jonas gave her a nod. Clara opened the cage. The hens burst out in a flurry of flapping wings and frantic squawking, scattering across the camp. Men cursed and staggered back, knocking over lanterns, drawing iron in confusion. Shadows danced violently as oil lamps toppled, lighting brush and fence posts in flickering flame. Then the first shot rang out. Jonas's rifle barked like a thunderclap, and a vulture by the corral spun and collapsed, his pistol flying from limp fingers. Chaos bloomed in the firelight. Clara moved next, slipping through the rocks, finding cover, lifting her sights. Her hands didn't shake. Not anymore. 2 more shots, clean, sharp, and 2 more outlaws dropped. Jonas shouted something low and commanding, and Clara obeyed without thinking, flanking wide toward the cabin. The door burst open. The leader stepped out, roaring orders, his voice low and snarling like a wounded bear. It was him, the man with the jagged scar and the eyes that hadn't flinched while her family begged for mercy. Clara's breath froze. Her finger brushed the trigger. The memory of screams pressed behind her eyes like smoke. But she didn't fire, not yet. She moved forward, closer, crouching behind a barrel, waiting for her moment. Jonas faced off in the center of the gulch now, moving with grim grace. Bullets sliced the air around him, but none found home. His aim was ruthless, surgical. He reloaded without looking, ducked, rolled, fired again. One outlaw tried to charge him from the side, didn't make it 3 steps. It was a dance, a reckoning long overdue. Clara's rifle rose slowly. Her breath steadied. The scarred man turned, barking something to one of his men, and that's when she saw it. Her father's rifle, slung over the outlaw's back like a trophy. Her blood turned to ice. She squeezed the trigger. The shot tore through the man's shoulder. He screamed, spinning backward, hitting the dirt with a thud. The rifle clattered beside him. Clara ran forward, boots kicking up dust, heart pounding like hooves in her chest. The outlaw scrambled, reaching for his gun. Clara kicked it away. He looked up at her, wheezing, blood seeping through his vest. "You," he hissed. "Little Coop girl." She stared at him, rifle leveled. Her face was stone. "You don't deserve my father's bullets," she said, and she turned away. The fire had spread to the edge of the cabin now, crackling and climbing. Jonas stood near the well, his coat singed, his jaw tight. One last vulture staggered out of the brush, coughing, pistol hanging limp in one hand. He looked at Jonas through bleeding eyes and gasped, "Marshal Crow, I thought you were dead." Jonas stepped forward, dust swirling around his boots, the glow of the fire casting long shadows across his face. "I was," he said, his voice like thunder rolling across stone, "until she gave me reason to live again." The outlaw collapsed, lifeless. Jonas exhaled slowly. Clara stood beside the fallen leader, her gaze distant, the firelight flickering in her eyes. Jonas approached, quiet, not touching her, just standing there with her, in the silence that followed after all the noise had died. "She could have killed him," he said softly. "She didn't," she answered, equally soft. The wind returned then, cool and strange, as if the canyon itself were exhaling. The chickens had scattered. The fire licked higher against the sky. The vultures were gone. Jonas walked into the smoldering cabin, stepping over wreckage and bodies. He returned a moment later with something wrapped in oilcloth, a badge, weathered and dulled, its edges scorched, but still bearing the star. Clara watched him unfold it. Her breath caught. "That was my father's," she whispered. Jonas nodded. "Found it in the loot pile. Along with other names I reckon we'll never know." He held it out to her. She stared at it for a long time. Then slowly, she took it. "Justice don't come easy," Jonas said. "But someone's got to wear the star." She held it in both hands. The metal was cold against her skin. Heavy. Real. She looked up at Jonas. "I can't go back to Bitter Hollow." He smiled, not a happy smile, but one of understanding. "I wasn't planning on letting you." They left the cabin behind, riding out beneath a sky that had never seemed so vast. The moon followed them, pale and faithful. The canyon behind them still glowed faintly, lit by the embers of everything they'd ended. They didn't speak much after that. They didn't need to. They weren't outlaws. Weren't lawmen either, not exactly. They were something in between. Riders of the dusk. Keepers of stories. carriers of ghosts. And so the tale of Clara and the ghost Marshall rides on, through dust, wind, and fire, where no one hides in coops anymore, and no one hurts the innocent again.